Vivid verses.
The kitchen smelled like garlic and rosemary, the kind of warm, comfortable aroma that made a house feel like home. Nathan Cross stood at the island counter, dicing vegetables with mechanical precision. The knife moved in practiced rhythm. Chop, 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 while his mind processed the contract amendment he'd been reviewing that afternoon. Outside, the October sun was setting over Fairhaven, painting the suburban Connecticut street in shades of amber and crimson. Thursday nights were Sarah's, a standing dinner with her book club that usually ran until 9. Nathan had the evening routine down to a science. The front door opened with its familiar creak. "Nathan, you here?" He glanced at the clock. 6:45. She was early. "Kitchen," he called back. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her blonde hair still in the professional twist she wore to her marketing director job. She carried her leather tote in one hand and her phone in the other, her expression hovering somewhere between thoughtful and determined. "That's her I've been thinking face," Nathan noted, recognizing the subtle tightness around her eyes. In 4 years of marriage, he'd become fluent in the micro-expressions that preceded important conversations. "Book club canceled?" he asked, keeping his tone light. "No, I left early. We need to talk about something." He set down the knife, giving her his full attention. "All right. Want some wine?" She shook her head. "Not yet. Let me just—" She paused, setting her bag on the counter. "Okay, so at book club, we were discussing this article about gender dynamics in language. How the way we speak actually reinforces power structures and inequality." Nathan nodded, his mind already cataloging potential directions this conversation might take. Sarah had always been interested in social issues, particularly those intersecting with her work in brand messaging. It was one of the things he appreciated about her intellectual curiosity. The article made some really compelling points. She continued, her energy building, about how masculine defaults in language, using he as generic words like mankind, even gender job titles. All of this subtly reinforces male dominance. And I started thinking about our own relationship, our own household. Hum. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed loosely, his expression neutral and attentive. And I realized that we probably perpetuate these patterns without even knowing it. So I had an idea. She pulled out her phone, opening what looked like a notes app. What if we did an experiment? Just for 10 days. A conscious effort to eliminate gendered language in our home. Interesting, Nathan thought. Ambitious timeline. Specific duration suggests she's thought this through. What would that look like practically, he asked. Sarah's face brightened at his question. So, we'd avoid using gendered pronouns. He, she, him, her. We'd use they with just names. We'd avoid words like husband and wife. Maybe just use partner or spouse. No gender terms like man, woman. You get the idea? Nathan processed this. And this would apply to both of us equally. Of course. That's the whole point. It's about awareness, about disrupting these automatic patterns we fall into. He studied her face, noting the flush in her cheeks, the rapid speech pattern, the way she held her phone like a shield. She's nervous, he realized. She expects resistance. 10 days, he said thoughtfully. 10 days. Starting tomorrow, Friday through the following Sunday. Then we can discuss what we learned from it. Nathan ran the calculation. 10 days would take them through next week when he had the Richardson deposition, through the dinner party they were hosting next Saturday for Sarah's colleagues. A non-trivial disruption. And you think this will provide meaningful insights into gender dynamics? He asked, keeping his tone genuinely curious rather than skeptical. I think it could be really illuminating. The article cited studies showing that even brief interventions in language patterns can shift awareness significantly. She's done her research, or at least she's read one article thoroughly. Nathan knew the difference between genuine academic investigation and motivated reasoning, but this wasn't the time to challenge her epistemology. "I'll think about it," he said. Sarah's expression shifted, a micro flash of frustration before the smile reasserted itself. "What's there to think about? It's just 10 days. If you believe in equality, this should be easy." And there it is. The reframe, the implicit accusation embedded in a hypothetical. If he resisted, it became evidence of his lack of commitment to equality. "I didn't say I wouldn't do it," Nathan replied evenly. "I said I'd think about it." Understanding the parameters of an experiment before agreeing to it seems reasonable. The parameters are simple. I just explained them. You explain the surface rules. I'm interested in the purpose, the methodology, how we'll measure outcomes. Sarah's jaw tightened. "Why do you have to make everything so complicated?" "I don't think clarity is the same as complication." They stood in silence for a moment, the kitchen suddenly feeling smaller. Nathan could see her internal struggle, the desire to push versus the awareness that pushing too hard might backfire. "Fine," she said finally. "Tomorrow morning, I'll put together a proper proposal, with goals and metrics and all the things you need to feel comfortable." "That sounds reasonable," Nathan said, turning back to the cutting board. "Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. She left the kitchen, her footsteps sharp on the hardwood floors. Nathan resumed chopping, his mind already modeling the situation from multiple angles. She wants compliance, he thought. The intellectual framework is post hoc justification. The question is, compliance with what exactly? The proposal appeared on the kitchen table Friday morning, printed on Sarah's company letterhead, formatted like a corporate memo. Nathan found it next to his coffee mug. Household Language Equity Experiment, a 10-day intervention. He scanned the document while drinking his coffee. Sarah had put real effort into this. 2 full pages of objectives, guidelines, and accountability measures. That last section made him pause. Daily check-ins where each participant reports their adherence tracking sheet for violations. See attached. Good faith effort to correct partners' violations in the moment review session on day 10 to discuss insights and potential permanent changes. The tracking sheet was a grid with dates across the top and categories down the side. Gendered pronouns, gendered nouns, gendered descriptors, failure to correct partner, resistance to correction. Nathan set down his coffee and read the document again, more slowly. This isn't an experiment, he realized. It's a compliance regime. The linguistic goals were camouflage for something more fundamental. A system of mutual surveillance and correction, with Sarah positioned as both participant and administrator. He heard Sarah's footsteps on the stairs. She entered the kitchen already dressed for work, her expression bright with anticipation. "You found it. What do you think?" Nathan tapped the paper thoughtfully. "You put a lot of work into this. I wanted to take it seriously. You said you needed clarity on parameters, so parameters." She gestured at the document. "I did say that," Nathan agreed, "though I notice you've appointed yourself as the primary administrator. Someone has to organize it. I'm the one who had the idea." True, though in actual experiments, there's usually some attempt at neutral observation to avoid bias. Sarah's smile tightened. "This isn't a dissertation, Nathan. It's just us trying to be more conscious about language for 10 days. Then why the tracking sheet? Why the failure to correct partner category? So we can learn from it. So we can see patterns." Nathan nodded slowly. "She believes this. Or she's convinced herself she believes it. I appreciate the effort you put into this," he said carefully, "but I'm going to decline to participate." The change in her expression was immediate, surprise, then hurt, then carefully controlled anger. "Why?" "Because I don't think it will accomplish what you say it will, and I don't think it's being presented honestly." "What's dishonest about it?" "The frame. You're presenting this as mutual exploration, but the structure puts you in a position of authority. You define the rules, track the violations, determine the outcomes. That's not an experiment. That's a regime change. Sarah's face flushed. I cannot believe you're being this resistant to something so simple. It's 10 days, Nathan. If you can't do that, what does that say about you? The reframe again. Make his refusal the issue, not the nature of the request itself. It says I think clearly about power dynamics and don't agree to one-sided arrangements, he replied calmly. One-sided? I'm doing it too. You're doing it on your own terms, with yourself as the judge of compliance. That's not the same thing. They stared at each other across the kitchen island. Nathan could see her mind working, trying different approaches, looking for leverage. Fine, she said finally. If you won't do it voluntarily, I'm implementing it anyway. Nathan raised an eyebrow. Meaning for the next 10 days, I'm following the guidelines in this house. And I'm going to track every time you use gendered language. At the end, we'll see how unconscious your patterns really are. You're going to unilaterally change the language rules of our household and track my violations. I'm going to hold us both to a higher standard, yes. Nathan finished his coffee, considering. This was a pivot point. Sarah was escalating, testing boundaries to see what he'd accept. All right, he said simply. Sarah blinked. All right, you do what you think is right. I'll continue as normal. But that defeats the whole purpose. Your purpose, maybe, not mine. Nathan, this is our home. We're partners. You can't just opt out of something like this. He stood, rinsing his coffee mug. You can't unilaterally impose language rules on another adult and call it partnership. So yes, I can opt out. And I am. This is incredibly disrespectful. Is it? Or is unilateral rule making the disrespectful part? Sarah grabbed her bag from the counter, her movements sharp with frustration. I'm leaving for work. But this conversation isn't over. It is for me, Nathan said mildly. Have a good day. She left without responding. Nathan stood in the empty kitchen, listening to her car pull away, then calmly returned to reviewing the Richardson deposition notes. By Sunday afternoon, Sarah had made 17 marks on her tracking sheet. Nathan knew this because she'd left it prominently displayed on the coffee table, weighted down with a decorative stone, impossible to miss. Each mark was annotated. Used he in reference to colleague, said husband instead of spouse, failed to self-correct after him. He'd glanced at it once, noted the methodology, then ignored it completely. Sarah, meanwhile, had committed fully to her experiment. She'd eliminated all gendered language from her speech with the zealotry of a recent convert, speaking in a stilted, self-conscious manner that made every sentence sound like a corporate sensitivity training video. Will my spouse like more coffee? She'd asked that morning. No, thanks, Nathan had replied, not looking up from the newspaper. The performance was exhausting to witness, but Nathan maintained his neutral demeanor, treating her linguistic contortions as background noise. By Sunday dinner, the strain was showing. You know, she said, carefully arranging pasta on her plate, I've been thinking about the dinner party next Saturday. Nathan cut into his chicken. What about it? Well, it's going to be mostly people from my work. And I think it would be really valuable if we could extend the language experiment to that setting. Here we go, Nathan thought. No longer content with tracking his private violations, she wanted to impose her framework on their social circle. That's an interesting idea, he said non-committally. So you'll do it? I didn't say that. Sarah set down her fork with a click. Nathan, this is important to me. These are my colleagues. I don't want to look like I'm married to someone who doesn't care about progressive values. And there it is, Nathan said calmly. This isn't about language patterns. It's about social performance. You want me to participate in your public demonstration of ideological purity. That's not fair, isn't it? You just explicitly said your concern is about how I make you look. Because actions reflect values. Nathan took a sip of water. Let me ask you something. In the past 3 days, how many times have you used your tracking sheet to note your own violations? Sarah's hesitation told him everything. Trying to be better about that. So you've given yourself 0 marks. I correct myself in the moment, but you don't track it. You only track mine. Do you see the problem there? The problem, Sarah said, her voice rising, is that you're treating this like some kind of gotcha game instead of a genuine attempt at growth. No, the problem is that you've created an asymmetric system of control and called it mutual improvement. Nathan set down his silverware and looked at her directly. Sarah, you unilaterally announced a set of rules, appointed yourself the arbiter of violations, ignored your own standards while meticulously tracking mine, and now want to extend this performance to our social circle. That's not an experiment. That's an exercise in control. So that's what you think of me? That I'm some kind of control freak? I think you've convinced yourself that this is about social justice, when it's actually about something else entirely. Sarah stood abruptly. I'm going to my sister's for the evening. Maybe by tomorrow you'll be willing to actually engage with this seriously. I've engaged very seriously, Nathan said. I just haven't complied. Those are different things. She grabbed her keys and left. Nathan finished his dinner alone, cleaned the kitchen, and spent the evening reading. Around 10, he received a text, staying at Diane's tonight. He replied simply, okay. The week passed in strange détente. Sarah maintained her linguistic experiment with rigid consistency, her speech becoming increasingly awkward. Nathan continued to speak normally, ignoring her tracking sheet, which had expanded to include categories like implicit gender assumptions and failure to model better behavior. They spoke less. Sarah left early for work and came home late. The tracking sheet grew more elaborate, with color coding and subcategories. Nathan watched this with clinical interest, the same way he might observe a deposition witness digging themselves deeper into an untenable position. Friday evening, Sarah reminded him about the dinner party. Just so we're clear on expectations, she said. These are professional colleagues, people who care about social issues. I'd appreciate it if you'd at least try to be conscious of your language. I'll be polite and engaging, Nathan said. As always. That's not what I asked. It's what I'm offering. Saturday morning, Nathan did the shopping and prep work. He'd planned a menu that was impressive but manageable. Roasted salmon with herb butter, seasonal vegetables, fresh bread. Simple enough to execute while hosting, sophisticated enough to make an impression. The guests arrived promptly at 7. Rebecca and Tom were first, carrying wine and conversation about their recent trip to Portland. Michelle and David followed, with stories about their daughter's soccer team. Lauren arrived last, with a partner named Jordan who worked in sustainable architecture. Nathan played host seamlessly, moving between kitchen and living room, keeping drinks filled and conversations flowing. Sarah watched him with an expression he couldn't quite read, part anxiety, part surveillance. Dinner started well. The food was excellent, the conversation lively. Then Rebecca mentioned an article she'd read. It was this fascinating piece about how corporate language shapes culture, like how some companies are moving away from gendered terms entirely. Nathan saw Sarah's posture shift, saw her eyes light up with opportunity. That's so interesting you bring that up, Sarah said. My partner and I have actually been doing an experiment about that this week. Here we go, Nathan thought. Really? Michelle leaned forward. What kind of experiment? Try to eliminate gendered language from our household, just to see how it affects our awareness and communication patterns. That's really cool, Jordan said. How's it going? Sarah's eyes flicked to Nathan, then back. It's been illuminating. Really shows you how deeply embedded these patterns are. I bet, Rebecca said. I've been trying to use they as default when I don't know someone's gender, And even that's harder than you'd think. Exactly. And the resistance you get, even from people you'd expect to be more progressive. Sarah let the statement hang, waited with meaning. Nathan continued eating, his expression neutral. Is it hard? Lauren asked. Like, do you find yourself slipping up a lot? I've been pretty consistent, Sarah said, but it takes real effort, constant vigilance. David turned to Nathan. What do you think, man? Has it changed how you see things? Nathan set down his fork, aware that everyone was now looking at him. I think language is interesting, he said calmly, but I'm more interested in how people treat each other in practice than in which pronouns they use. But don't you think language shapes practice? Michelle asked. Sometimes, though I'd argue that genuine respect and equality don't require constant linguistic performance to prove they exist. Sarah's cheeks flushed. That's dismissive. Language absolutely matters. I didn't say it doesn't matter. I said I'm more interested in actual treatment than performative speech. Performative? Sarah's voice had an edge now. You think trying to use more inclusive language is performative? The table grew uncomfortable, sensing the underlying tension. I think, Nathan said carefully, that there's a difference between genuine inclusivity and what amounts to language policing. One comes from respect for others. The other comes from a need for control. The table fell silent. Wow, Sarah said softly. I can't believe you're doing this now. In front of my colleagues. You're the one who brought it up, Nathan replied. I was happy to talk about Portland food. Rebecca laughed nervously. Maybe we should, but Sarah was locked in now. You've been undermining this entire experiment from the beginning, refusing to participate, making it into some kind of joke. I haven't made anything into a joke. I've simply declined to participate in something I find unreasonable. Unreasonable? Trying to be more conscious of gender equality is unreasonable. Unilaterally imposing speech rules and tracking violations is unreasonable. There's a difference. Lauren cleared her throat. Maybe this is something you two should discuss privately? No, Sarah said, her voice rising. I want everyone to hear this. I want witnesses to how my husband, she practically spat the gendered word, has completely disrespected my attempts to create a more equitable household. Nathan stood, carefully placing his napkin on the table. I'm going to step outside for a moment. Please, everyone keep eating. He walked out through the kitchen into the cool October night. Behind him, he could hear the murmur of uncomfortable conversation. 5 minutes passed before the back door opened. It was Lauren. Hey, she said softly. You okay? I'm fine. Sorry about the scene. Don't be. Listen, I don't know what's going on with you two, but that in there, that was uncomfortable. Sarah's telling everyone about your violations, but honestly, it sounds kind of controlling. Nathan looked at her. You think so? I mean, tracking someone's language violations? That's intense. Yeah. Lauren squeezed his arm and went back inside. Nathan waited another few minutes, then followed. The dinner party had effectively ended. People were gathering their things, making excuses. Sarah stood in the living room, arms crossed, watching her carefully planned evening disintegrate. Nathan helped people find their coats, walked them to their cars, accepted their awkward sympathies. When the last guest had left, he came back inside to find Sarah standing exactly where she'd been, tears running down her face. You humiliated me, she said. No, Nathan replied quietly. You humiliated yourself by trying to use our marriage as a prop for your ideological performance. How can you be so cold? I'm not cold. I'm clear. There's a difference. Sarah wiped her eyes. I can't do this anymore. Can't do what? Live with someone who doesn't respect me. Nathan felt something shift in his chest. Clarity, maybe. Sarah, I respect you deeply, but respect doesn't mean compliance. And what you've been doing, the tracking, the unilateral rulemaking, the public pressure, That's not about respect or equality. That's about control. So what are you saying? Nathan sat down. She remained standing. I'm saying we need to have a serious conversation about whether this marriage can continue. Sarah's eyes widened. You're threatening divorce over a language experiment? I'm stating a reality. This isn't about language. It's about fundamental respect and partnership. You don't get to impose unilateral rules on another adult and call it marriage. I wasn't. Sarah. His voice was firm but not loud. Listen to what I'm about to say. This marriage continues only if there's mutual respect. That means no more unilateral rulemaking. No more tracking my behavior. No more attempts at social pressure or public humiliation. If you want a partner who will simply comply with whatever you demand, I'm not that person. She stood frozen, processing. And if there are future attempts at this kind of control, Nathan continued, whether it's about language or anything else, I'm done. Not as a threat, but as a boundary. I will not be managed or manipulated. Those are my terms. Your terms. Sarah's voice was shaky. What about what I need? What do you need, Sarah? Actual equality? Or just someone to control? That's not fair. It's a genuine question. Sarah sank into the chair across from him, her face in her hands. They sat in silence. I don't know, she finally said. I don't know what I was trying to do. Then maybe we both need to think about what we're actually doing here. Are you saying you want a divorce? Nathan considered carefully. I'm saying that what we've been doing this past week isn't a marriage. It's a power struggle. And I'm not interested in power struggles. So either we find our way back to being partners, or we admit this isn't working. Sarah looked up. I don't want a divorce. Then things have to change. Really change. Okay, she whispered. But Nathan saw the calculation in her eyes. She's not done, he realized. She's just regrouping. Sunday morning came quietly. Nathan woke to find Sarah at the kitchen table with her laptop. The tracking sheet was gone. Morning, he said. Morning. She didn't look up. Nathan made coffee, noting her rigid posture. I've been thinking, Sarah said. You're right. I took things too far with the experiment. Okay, but I still think there are valid points about gender dynamics in relationships. Real issues we should address. Nathan sat down. Such as the fact that you make more money than I do, which creates an implicit power imbalance. Or the fact that you make most of the major decisions without really consulting me. New approach, same goal. I consult you on everything significant, he said evenly. You decided not to participate in my experiment without discussion, because it was a unilateral demand, not a mutual proposal. See, this is what I mean. You frame everything in your terms. Your logic, your rules. Nathan studied her face, seeing the new strategy. If direct control hadn't worked, she'd try framing him as the controller. Sarah, what do you actually want from this marriage? I want a partner, not a dictator. I've never dictated anything to you. You dictated that we wouldn't do the language experiment. I declined to participate. You proceeded anyway. Who's the dictator in that scenario? She closed her laptop. I think we should take a break. A break from the marriage. Some time apart to think about whether we can make this work. Nathan felt the calculation behind the suggestion. She was trying to create leverage, make him feel the absence, and come back more compliant. If that's what you want, he said calmly. Sarah blinked, clearly expecting more resistance. You'd be okay with that. I'd be okay with clarity. If you want separation, we can do that. If you want to work on the marriage as actual partners, we can do that. But I'm not going to fight to convince you to want me, and I'm not going to beg you to respect basic boundaries. You're being cold again. I'm being clear again. Sarah stood abruptly. I'm going to stay at Diane's for a while. Give us both space to think. All right. That's it. Just all right. Nathan looked at her steadily. What do you want me to say? That I'll miss you? I will. That this is sad? It is. But I'm not going to perform distress to prove my commitment. If you need space, take space. I'm not going to chase you or beg you to stay. Most husbands would fight for their marriage. I have fought for our marriage by maintaining boundaries, by refusing to participate in toxic dynamics, by being honest about what I will and won't accept. If you define fighting as capitulation, then no, I won't do that. She left the kitchen, went upstairs. 20 minutes later, she came down with a suitcase. I'll call you in a few days, she said from the doorway. Okay, you really aren't going to stop me? No. She stood there another moment, then left. Nathan heard her car pull away. The house fell silent. He finished his coffee, then sat in the quiet living room, thinking. It's over, he realized. Not because of the fight, but because Sarah needed control more than partnership. And when control proved elusive, she'd keep trying different strategies until either she succeeded or the marriage collapsed. Nathan didn't feel angry. He felt clear. He pulled out his phone and texted his attorney. Need to schedule a consultation about divorce proceedings. The response came quickly. Sorry to hear it. Tuesday work? Perfect. Nathan set down his phone and looked around the living room. At the house they'd bought together, the life they'd built. He felt sad about it, genuinely sad, but not uncertain. Some things couldn't be compromised on. Mutual respect was one of them. Sarah called 4 days later, Thursday evening. Hi, she said, her voice small. Hi, how are you? I'm fine. You? I've been thinking a lot. About everything. I think maybe I overreacted. With the separation. Maybe we should try couples therapy after all. I filed for divorce, Nathan said calmly. Silence. Then what? I filed Tuesday. You should receive papers next week. You? Nathan, I was just taking space to think. I didn't say I wanted a divorce. I know, but I realize this pattern isn't going to change. You'll try one approach, I'll set a boundary. You'll regroup and try differently. We'll go in circles until one of us breaks. I'd rather leave now, clearly, than drag this out for years. But we can fix this. We can go to therapy. Sarah, therapy only works when both people want the same thing. You want me to be more compliant. I want to be respected as an autonomous adult. Those aren't compatible goals. That's not true. I don't want you to be compliant. You wanted me to follow unilateral speech rules, submit to tracking and correction, perform your ideology for your colleagues. And when I didn't, you framed me as the problem and threatened separation. That's not partnership. That's attempted management. He could hear her crying. Part of him felt guilty, but the clearer part knew this was necessary. I don't want to lose you, she said. Then you should have treated me like a partner instead of a project. Can we at least meet? Talk in person. If you want closure, I'm willing to have that conversation. But I'm not changing my mind about the divorce. When? This weekend. Saturday afternoon, here at the house. This is really happening. Yes. I hate you right now. I know, but you'll understand eventually. She hung up without saying goodbye. Saturday arrived with cold rain. Nathan had the house clean, coffee made, legal documents organized on the dining room table. Sarah arrived exactly on time, looking exhausted. Hi, she said quietly. Come in. Coffee. Sure. They sat at the dining room table, where they'd shared hundreds of meals, where Nathan had first told her he loved her. I still don't understand why you're being so extreme about this, Sarah said. It's not extreme. It's proportional. How is divorce proportional to one argument? It's not about the language experiment. It's about what it revealed. Your need to control, your willingness to violate boundaries, your inability to see me as an equal partner. Sarah's eyes flashed. I always saw you as equal. No, you saw me as someone who should comply with your vision of what equal looks like. That's different. So you're just giving up? Nathan leaned back. Let me ask you something. In the past 2 weeks, how many times have you acknowledged that you might have been wrong? Sarah was quiet. You said you overreacted about the separation, but you haven't said that unilaterally imposing speech rules was wrong. That tracking violations was wrong. That pressuring me in front of your colleagues was wrong. You've only adjusted tactics. Because I still think the underlying issues are real. Maybe they are, but your method was fundamentally disrespectful. And you can't see that, which means you'll do it again. That's not fair. Sarah, here's what's not fair. Demanding I submit to arbitrary rules, tracking my compliance, threatening our marriage when I maintain boundaries, and framing all of this as my failure. That's not fair. She set down her mug with shaking hands. I was just trying to make things better. Better according to your definition, enforced by your methods. That's not improvement. That's control. Rain drummed against the windows. So that's it, Sarah said finally. For years, and you're just done? I'm done with the dynamic. If you were willing to genuinely examine your behavior, to take real responsibility, maybe we could work through this. But I don't think you are. And I'm not willing to spend years hoping you'll eventually see me as a partner instead of a project. Sarah stood, walking to the window. You know what I think? I think you never really loved me. Because if you did, you'd fight harder. Nathan felt something crack in his chest. I love you very much. That's why this is hard. But loving someone doesn't mean accepting being controlled by them. She turned, tears streaming. I wasn't trying to control you. Then what were you trying to do? I was trying to make our relationship better, more equal, by unilaterally imposing rules, tracking violations, and punishing noncompliance. I wasn't. She stopped, seeming to hear her own words. It wasn't like that. Sarah, I have photographs of your tracking sheet. 17 violations in the first weekend. Color-coded categories. That's exactly what it was like. She sank back in her chair, looking defeated. I don't know what else to do. You could start by acknowledging what you actually did. I got carried away with an idea. Try again. She looked at him, and for a moment he saw something real beneath the defensiveness. I tried to control you. Why? I don't know. I think you do know. Sarah was quiet for a long time. I was scared. Of what? Of not being enough. Of you leaving. Of losing control of my life. Nathan felt his heart soften slightly. So you try to control me first. Maybe. Yes. That's not love, Sarah. That's fear masquerading as ideology. I know. She was crying openly now. I know, and I'm sorry, and I don't know how to fix it. You fix it by working on yourself. But you do that work separate from me. We can't do it together. No. Because you'll just try to control the therapy process too. Sarah nodded slowly, accepting reality. The papers on the table. Initial proposal for asset division. It's fair. You can have your attorney review it. They sat together for another hour, working through logistics. Who kept the house, how they'd divide assets, what to do about shared counts. It was all very civil, very organized, very sad. As Sarah was leaving, she paused at the door. I really did love you, you know. I know, Nathan said. I believe that. I just didn't know how to do it right. Maybe you will, next time, with someone else. She nodded, tears starting again. Take care of yourself, Nathan. You too. He watched her drive away until her car disappeared. Then he closed the door, returned to the empty house, and allowed himself to feel the full weight of what had ended. It hurt. Of course it hurt. But it was also, unmistakably, the right decision. 3 months later, Nathan received a letter from Sarah. She was living in Boston now, seeing a therapist twice a week. I've learned a lot, she wrote, about control, about fear, about why I needed to manage everything. My therapist thinks it comes from childhood stuff, my parents' divorce, my mom's need to control everything afterward. I inherited her patterns without realizing it. I'm not asking you to take me back. I know that's not on the table. But I wanted you to know that you were right. About all of it. I wasn't trying to create equality. I was trying to create compliance. And I'm sorry. Nathan read the letter twice, then filed it away. He felt glad Sarah was getting help, genuinely glad. But he also felt confirmed in his decision. Some people needed to control others because they couldn't control themselves. And that was sad, but it wasn't something he could fix. He returned to his life, his work, his friends, his quiet house. There would be other relationships eventually. But for now, he was content with clarity, with boundaries maintained, with the peace that came from knowing he'd done the right thing, even when the right thing was hard.
Thanks for listening.